Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim Defede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim Defede. The Florida legislature started their 60-day regular session this week, and it kicked off with Governor Ron DeSantis delivering his 8th and final State of the State address. The speech was light on policy. Take, for instance, the issue of property taxes. For more than a year, the governor has been saying he believes the state should eliminate homesteaded property taxes, but he has never laid out any specifics. And if you were hoping to hear some during his address to the legislature, you were disappointed. This is what the governor had to say on the matter.
You should be able to own your home without paying perpetual rent to the government. The legislature has the ability to place a measure on the ballot to provide transformational relief for taxpayers. Let's resolve to all work together, get something done, and let the people have a say.
The only real news to come out of his address was his failure to shake House Speaker Danny Perez's hand, a snub that did not go unnoticed. It's no secret that the Speaker and the Governor do not get along. As Perez made it clear last year, the House was no longer willing to be subservient to the Governor. So this week, when I spoke to Perez about the upcoming session, we started with that awkward moment that had Tallahassee abuzz.
I noticed that as well, Jim. Look, my job is to lead the House. I was elected by my body to do so. I treat everyone with respect. I'm able to compartmentalize my personal differences with someone with that of the personal responsibility that I have to lead the chamber and lead the state. Of course, I turned my body. I was expecting a handshake. I would have shaken his hand. Same way I'd answer his call, the same way I'd sit with him, the same way I discuss any topic he'd like, even if we disagree on it. You know, disagreeing sometimes is seen as being disrespectful, and I don't understand that in politics. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. It's just a matter of how you relay that, and if you have respect for people. But disagreeing, as long as you're both trying to get to the same goal, I think is healthy. It's healthy for democracy. It's part of the important pillars of our country. But yeah, it was a bit awkward, and I thought disrespectful, but it's all right. We move forward.
You said something a second ago, and I read this as well. You had actually reached out and wanted a meeting with the governor prior to the start of this session to discuss maybe some things you can work on together, some things to try to iron out differences. Did you ever get a response from the governor about trying to sit down with him?
I called him. He didn't answer. No, he didn't. He didn't call me back. But yeah, look, it's just, it's our job to lead, and you got to sit down and you got to be mature. You got to be adults. Jim, that's to each his own. I guess that's how he thinks he should govern himself. And I think it's wrong. And not even because of me, Jim. I'm a big boy. I'll be all right. But really for the people, we represent the state of Florida, and you got to sit down and you got to govern. And sometimes it's with people that maybe you just don't see eye to eye. But I've told him. I said, look, I think he's been a good governor. I agree with him on most issues. Sometimes we just have different opinions on how to get there. But I don't see us getting together anytime soon.
When we last spoke, you actually had used a phrase that you thought that he had an authoritarian governing style. Do you still believe that?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you don't want to sit with people that have a difference of opinion, then yes, that means that the only opinion you think is important and valid is yours. And I think that's wrong. I think you have to sit with people. I sit with people that I disagree with all the time. And by the way, most of them aren't able to change my mind. I still disagree with them at the end of the conversation, but it's my job to hear them out and tell them my point of view and allow them to tell me theirs. And maybe they can change my opinion. Maybe I do move a little bit. Maybe I do a complete 180. I don't know, but you have to hear people out. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful things about this country is when you're able to civilly disagree with someone in a respectful way. I mean, my parents came from Cuba, and the reason they left is because their opinion wasn't allowed to be heard, and you couldn't say what you really thought, and so they left. And and here we are, in my opinion, the greatest state in the country, and a difference of opinion gets you a shunned shoulder.
I want to turn to property taxes. I know when you and I have spoken before, you envision that rather than several ballot measures being presented to voters in November, you think there'll be one ballot issue with maybe several parts to it, perhaps something related to providing additional relief for folks 65 or and older, as well as some other potentials. I know that there are a handful of a half a dozen or so proposals working their way through the House right now. How do you see this playing out, and do you envision that both the House and the Senate will get into some sort of agreement on what to put on the ballot during this regular session of the legislature?
Look, the House is the only body that's moved anything on property taxes. It's very easy to talk the talk. Everyone gets on, on their soapbox and says, yeah, we want to eliminate property taxes. The Senate hasn't given any proposals. The governor hasn't given any proposals. I have to give him credit for bringing up the conversation over a year ago, but we're over a year from that first announcement of him wanting to eliminate property taxes, and we have zero content from him. How he's going to do it, when he's going to do it, how how are you going to make sure that the funds that you're now eliminating are still going to be able to provide the necessary services? I have no idea how he plans on doing that. But here in the House, we've been walking the walk. We have 7 different proposals. Some are moving fast than others. Our goal is to pass one so that at the ballot in November, people can decide on one initiative. But what it is that the Senate or the governor agree on, we have no idea. The Senate has said they're going to wait for the governor to tell them what to do. And so really, we just, here we are in this standstill where the governor wants to eliminate property taxes. I tell him, I've said this publicly. I said, to the tune of $21 billion in education that you're about to eliminate. So what we have done is we have eliminated property tax, homestead property tax, with the exception of the school property tax. That's one of our proposals so that we don't defund education. At the same time, it doesn't allow local governments to defund the police or our first responders or firefighters. We have that in the House. And, we don't know if that is something that the governor agrees with or not, because he hasn't opined on it. He just, goes on Hannity and says he's going to eliminate property taxes. Well, great. Okay, send me the proposal. But we don't have that from him. So, Jim, I still don't know where we end. Yesterday, I was meeting with local governments from across the state, and they say, what are you going to do with property taxes? Because we kind of have to plan. And it's hard for me to have a meeting like that because I tell them I don't know. I have no idea. I think it all depends on what the proposal is that we pass on how they have to govern locally. And I get their concern. I don't blame local governments for being concerned. I would be too. But they want to plan, and it's hard for us to allow them the opportunity to go and cut where they need to cut so that they can stay afloat when we don't know the proposal. So for now, Jim, I think eventually, of course, I do feel confident we'll get a proposal across the line. But I don't know what the proposal is yet, because the only body that has actually done any work on property taxes, and by the way, this isn't a new thing of this week, we've been doing this for months, is the House.
What's your relationship like with Senate President Ben Albritton right now?
Look, I think Ben's a good person. I think he's a good husband. I think he's a good dad. But as a political partner, it's been tough for me. We had an agreement last year towards the end of session. We agreed on it. We each went back to our chambers. We publicly told the media we have a deal. We were all very happy. Largest tax cut ever. A weekend goes by. He came back Monday and told me that he no longer wanted to do the deal. I don't function like that, Jim. I'm a young guy. I'm 38, but I'm an old soul. And if I give you my word and I give you my handshake, you could take it to the bank. And
well, I think he would say that while he thought he had an agreement with you when he went back to his members, that his style of leadership is not one to force a proposal down his members' throats, and so that when he got the pushback that he did from his membership, that he had to come to you and sort of say, I can't move forward with this any longer.
Okay, Jim, simple. Then don't make the deal with me. I mean, you're the Senate president. Then don't make the deal. He made the deal because he believes that he can deliver his body. I wouldn't have made a deal that I would have gone back to my chamber and I knew I would have had the votes for. And if his governing style is that he has to go back and ask his senators to see if they like every detail of the deal, all right, then put me in the room with his senators. I can negotiate with all 40 of them at the same time. I said, but that you're the leader of the Florida Senate, and look, he's a good man. I hate even saying that. It's frustrating for me because we have different governing styles. I know my membership. I know what they like. I know what they don't like. I know what parts of the state they come from. I know what's important to them. And so when I make a deal, I'm making it on behalf of 120 people that represent millions and millions and millions in the state of Florida. That's what they chose me for. They chose me to be the speaker to represent this body. I'm going to go and I'm going to do what's best for the body. And I know the deal we made would have passed the House, without a doubt. I know my membership. But look, let's turn the page on this, Jim. Let's hope that this session is better. I have hope that it can be. I think he's a good person. It's frustrating because, I think there are missed opportunities for the Senate and the House to work together, and I think the Senate has put themselves in a place to where, they're waiting for the governor to make some decisions. And although the governor has done a good job in his position, we are an independent, co-equal branch of government, and I think we have to govern accordingly.
Well, I know, in speaking to you previously, you said that it's important sometimes to actually give something to someone else that is important to them, that is one of their priorities, that may not necessarily be particularly important to you or necessarily serve your constituents. And along that line, speaking of the Senate president, I do think of the issue of rural renaissance. Granted, rural renaissance is not an issue that is on the hearts and minds of people in Miami-Dade County and some of the urban areas, but for his constituency, it's important. Can you envision, sort of as an olive branch, moving forward with rural renaissance just to sort of give him something that he knows is important for his constituents?
Yeah, potentially. I don't think anything's off the table. By the way, we still have a rural community down in Homestead, still part of Miami-Dade County. But yeah, Jim, I mean, maybe we'll see. Well, there's a similar version of rural renaissance here that a member has filed in the House, and if the membership wants to vote for that and move it along the process, I'll be perfectly fine with that. I don't, I was I was mentioning this to someone else yesterday on agency bills. Obviously, our agencies answer to the governor, and people asked if I was gonna, not allow agency bills to move through the House. And I said, no, that's ridiculous. I said, that's petulant. No, of course I'm going to let agency bills move through the House if the membership believes that those are good bills and good policy for the state of Florida. And it's the same with anything that the Senate cares about. What I will tell you is just because he cares about rural renaissance, it's not going to make me move the bill or care about the bill more or less. What his importance is not what makes me move because of the priorities of the Senate. So if it moves because the membership wants it and they vote for it, and eventually he gets what he wants. But we'll see. I am not saying that it is impossible for him to get what he wants. There's a possibility. We'll see what happens.
When we come back, we continue our conversation with the House Speaker, and I ask about the issue of redistricting ahead of the midterm elections. Stay with us. Welcome back. Here is part 2 of my interview with Florida House Speaker Danny Perez. I know that you were prepared to deal with redistricting during the regular session, the 60-day session. The governor has made it clear he doesn't want to even bring it up during the regular session. He wants to have a special session later down the road on redistricting. Tell me why you think that the legislature should deal with it now.
I still believe we can deal with it now. And look, the governor wants to deal with it in special session. I can do that as well. It's not that I'm opposed to it. I just think we're here. We're in Tallahassee. We're working. We're here because the Constitution of our state tells us to. We can do redistricting right now. We haven't done it. We haven't started, to be very honest with you, Jim. It's a conversation that I think has to be had, but I don't want to bring everyone back in April when they're back home, when they're back at work, at their full-time job. We're a part-time legislature. People want to go home when we're done with these 60 days. They want to be with their families. They want to be back in their communities. Most of them have an election again in November. I'm sure they want to campaign. I luckily do not, because this is my last term. But Jim, I think it's irresponsible to bring everyone back. But if that's what he wants to do, it's not something that I'm gonna fight him on, and we can come back here and we can do redistricting in April if that's where everything ends up. But I still stand by what I said earlier. I would prefer to do it now.
Let me ask the broader question on redistricting. Why is it necessary? Normally, redistricting is done every 10 years. Why are we moving forward in Florida with a redistricting plan? Because it seems to me that the only reason to do it is for political purposes, because you want to try to get more Republicans and fewer Democrats sent to Congress in the fall, so that hopefully that President Trump maintains, the Republicans maintain control of the House next year. Is that really a good reason to move forward with redistricting for political purposes?
I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is we've had a recent court decision in BVM that we believe allows us the opportunity to have that conversation and engage in redistricting on a congressional level again. There is another Supreme Court decision that still hasn't come out from Louisiana that we believe could have some sort of effect on redistricting, but what effect is still up in the air, and so we don't know because there hasn't been a decision from that court yet. But in the meantime, given the court's decisions as of late, we believe that as we sit here right now, it's a conversation that we can have.
But just because you can have the conversation doesn't mean you need to have the conversation. Danny, I appreciate what you're saying, and I realize from a lawyer's standpoint, you have to say this in part because if you did say that it was for political purposes, it would run afoul of fair districts, which is in the constitutional amendment that says you shouldn't be redrawing congressional districts for political purposes. So how do you convince the public that you're actually sincere in what you're trying to do here?
I think a lot of it depends on what ends up happening, Jim. We don't know. We haven't even began the redistricting conversation yet. we're going to have the conversation. When, I don't know. Maybe this is a better question for us to have after then, but we don't even know, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And then, when you have that final product, we don't even know what the final product's going to look like. So, we'll see. We're willing and able to have that conversation here in the House. We believe the sooner the better, just because we're up here and we're ready to work. But if we have to wait for that, we'll do that.
I want to ask about Schools of Hope. I know that one of the things that the legislature passed last year was Schools of Hope, which allowed charter schools to be able to use unused space within the public schools, the current K-12 system in Florida, and that a lot of the charter schools have sort of laid claim to different schools throughout the state, particularly in Miami-Dade and Broward County. But there's a concern, I think even Ken Griffin has raised the concern, that when you have for-profit charter school companies like Academica that want to move into these schools and not have to pay any sort of fee, even though that they're going to use the classrooms, the libraries, the cafeterias, that's a real problem. Do you envision revisiting Schools of Hope and perhaps charging charter schools to use those classroom spaces?
I've heard those. I've heard those opinions, Jim. We do have multiple bills through the House. Who the members are off the top of my head, I don't remember, but we do have multiple bills that are moving through the House that have to do with Schools of Hope. I mean, look, what we were trying to solve for, Jim, is we have a significant amount of vacancies in some of our traditional public schools, and so what we wanted to do was use that space and give kids the option, or parents the option, to put their children in whatever school it is that they believe best suits their child. And when we have vacancies in some of our schools, we wanted to make sure that we filled them. But I understand that people don't believe the product was perfect. That's usually the outcome of most bills we pass, if we're being honest. But we're going to have conversations on Schools of Hope this year.
Philosophically, though, do you believe that charter schools, or particularly for-profit charter schools, should pay something to school districts?
They do. Charter schools do pay certain fees to the school board and to the traditional public school system. But I hear their argument. I get it. I don't think it's a bad argument, but it's something that we'll look at this year.
The issue of data centers seems to be rising in prominence. The governor has been railing against data centers and concerns that they have with regard to increasing power bills and the use of water. Where are you on the issue of data centers?
Last year, the governor's office gave us a bill to put inside our tax package, essentially, that gave a tax break of $100 million to data centers. That came at the request of the governor. We did it, and we passed it, and he signed it. That was part of our tax package last year. Now he's saying that he's against data centers. I think from where I sit, I see him as talking out of both sides of his mouth, and I think he has to kind of pick a lane. Some of his concerns on data centers, I hear them. I hear them loud and clear. I'm not saying that it's a conversation I'm not willing to have. I don't think, I'm not saying that they are perfect and that, we just have to let them go be the wild, wild west. I'm okay on having a conversation on what a bill would look like regarding data centers and AI. But, speaking of AI, Jim, it's our generation's nuclear arms race. It is no longer about missiles, and it is now about technology and artificial intelligence. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to put this country in a position to where we fall behind to the Chinese on artificial intelligence because we're not willing to have that tough conversation now on AI. I think this is a national security issue. I think this is something that the federal government should lead the states on. I know President Trump has been very vocal on artificial intelligence and on data centers. But what we do here in the state, I think, should rely significantly on the federal government, because I have always considered AI to be a national security issue.
Up next, I talk to the Democratic leader of the Florida House, Fentress Driscoll. Stay with us.